Welcome to the TodePond saga. Today, let's look at 9 different ways to make sand using SpaceTode, a spatial programming language. We'll go from the ridiculously simple all the way up to the stupidly overcomplicated. So I invite you to watch all of the video to see where this goes. Sand version 1. The most simple thing you can do is get your sand atom to try to fall down into an empty space below it. If it can't, it tries to slide down into an empty space to the side instead, and it works quite nicely. However, the sand can actually squeeze through tiny gaps, which we might not want. This leads us to sand version 2. Let's change the second rule diagram to check that there's also an empty space for the sand to move through when it's sliding down. This stops it squeezing through tiny gaps. But what about water? We probably want sand to fall down into water too, not just float on the surface. So, sand version 3. Let's add some more rule diagrams to check if there's a water atom below the sand, so that it can fall down into water as well. But this approach doesn't actually move the water atoms. Instead, it just deletes the one below and creates a new one above, to just give the impression that the sand is moving through the water. This can be a problem if your water atoms are holding some data. For example, let's say you drop some food colouring into the water. The sand will delete the coloured water and replace it with new clean water. Let's fix this with sand version 4. We'll use the select keyword to select the water atom we want, so we can move it above the sand. This means the water can keep all the data it's holding and also keep its colour. Now, what if we want to add another liquid, like lemonade? Our sand doesn't fall down into it. We would have to manually add every single new liquid we make into the sand element's code, which could be kind of annoying. So, sand version 5. Let's give every element a state of matter. So, sand would be solid, water would be liquid, and so on. This means we can add any new element we like lemonade, and it should work fine with sand straight away. But it's kind of unrealistic that sand falls through water the same speed that it falls through the air. So, sand version 6. Instead of giving elements a state of matter property, like solid or liquid, let's give them a resistance property. The higher their resistance, the more they resist sand falling down into them. The air has no resistance in this version, so sand falls through it quickly. Water has some resistance, so sand falls through it more slowly. This slime has even more resistance, so sand goes even slower through it. But it's still kind of weird how sand seems to pull liquids upwards as it falls into them. Let's try to fix that with sand version 7. This version is when it starts to get a bit silly. Let's write tons and tons of rule diagrams for all the different scenarios we can think of, so the sand splashes away water when it can. This helps it to look a little bit more believable. But what if you want to take it even further? Sand version 8. Let's get rid of all the diagrams and just write the element's behaviour in JavaScript instead. In the SpaceTode language, you can embed JavaScript in lots of different places if you want to just do things manually instead. And there's one final version I want to show you. Sand version 9. Let's get rid of everything from the sand element so that it doesn't do anything by itself. Instead, let's make a Graviton element that spreads around and applies gravity to anything that it touches. This turns everything round on its head. You can even make the gravitons invisible, so that it looks like the sand is falling down on its own. Do you have any ideas for ways to make sand? You can try out all of the versions I've shown at sans.sandpond.cool. All of their code is on the Sans branch on GitHub. You can find them all in the Elements folder. But thanks very much for watching. I really appreciate it. And hopefully I'll see you next time.